Hands on the right day for once, and we can celebrate it all together. No football to watch this weekend, but good baseball.
Watched a few games over the weekend. All right, just 5 days to the World Series now. And after yesterday's playoff games, the Giants and the Twins are looking even better. In a few minutes, our playoff correspondent, Willie Starger, will have a report from Detroit. What else?
And in a big march in Washington yesterday, 200,000 strong gay rights activists marched in Washington to demand equal rights for gays and more help in the fight against AIDS. We'll be talking in this half hour with two leaders in the battle for gay rights. Also, Hattie Kaufman is going to have a special look at the emotional centerpiece of yesterday's activities. Later on in the morning, Richard Dreyfuss is going to be here, Joan Didion, Jane Fonda, a cast of hundreds, and the little-known truth about Christopher Columbus also, appropriately enough. We'll talk about that today. Right now, Jed Duval has more modern news, something that's happened since 1492, I suspect. Good morning, Jed.
Yeah, since yesterday. Good morning to you both. Good morning, everyone. George Bush makes it official today. He is running for president. Bush will try to become the first sitting vice president to win the presidency since Martin Van Buren in 1836. Bush is heading to Houston today to make the announcement, and Carol Simpson, who covers the Bush campaign for us, is standing by in the rain at Andrews Air Force Base. Carol?
Good morning, Jed. The vice president will be leaving here aboard Air Force 2 at about 8:15 this morning on his way to Houston, where he will make the announcement. And one of the things we think about as he prepares to announce formally his candidacy for the presidency is some of the pluses and minuses the vice president has. Among the pluses are certainly the incumbency and being able to travel on Air Force 2 and having Secret Service protection and having an entourage and having name recognition. That all comes with being Vice President of the United States. He also has a lot of money, $13 million at last count, and he's expected to have $20 million before the end of the year. He's also got very good organization in every state in the union. And he also has name recognition. People know who George Bush is. But he has some problems, too, as well. And among them are the fact that he is vice president, which means he cannot express his own opinions about things and or be perceived as being disloyal to the president. Now, that creates the other big problem that he has for himself, and that is this wimp factor. Over the weekend, Newsweek magazine released a poll showing that 51% of the American people polled think that Bush has a serious problem with this wimp image. So it remains to be seen what the vice president is going to do to try to overcome that. As I say, he has lots of pluses, but he does have some minuses.
Thank you, Carol. Carol Simpson at Andrews Air Force Base. Democrats and Republicans say the debate on Robert Bork's Supreme Court nomination could begin as early as this week. The White House is hoping for a quick vote on Bork, who seems certain to lose, so the work may begin on President Reagan's next nominee. Gays and lesbians hope yesterday's march on Washington made Americans more aware of how many Americans are homosexual and of the suffering of AIDS victims. Jackie Judd reports on the rally that drew an estimated 200,000.
It was the largest protest Washington has seen in over 2 decades, 3 times larger than the last big gay rights march in 1979.
Basically, it's just like a self-affirmation of my life, you know, as a gay person.
The only way that oppression against gay people will stop is if we come out of the closet.
They came from across the nation to press for a law barring discrimination against homosexuals.
Human rights, civil rights for lesbian and gay people, and we will not be denied.
It is the AIDS crisis, though, more than discrimination, that galvanized the protesters, the fear and the reality of the killer disease.
We're being treated like second-class citizens because they think it's a gay disease.
Speaker after speaker called for more money and for more medical research.
We must fight AIDS and every form of death. Let's give life a chance.
Earlier, death from AIDS was on display. A quilt with 2,000 handmade panels, each bearing the name of a victim, was unfurled.
Tomorrow, some of the protesters here will take their demand for guaranteed civil rights to the steps of the Supreme Court. But this huge turnout here may be one of the loudest and strongest messages that judges and lawmakers will hear for some time.
Jackie Judd, ABC News, Washington.
In a few minutes, Charles Gibson will be speaking with a leader of the gay march and with a gay congressman. A Japanese geneticist on the faculty of MIT has won the Nobel Prize for Medicine. The announcement was this morning that Susumu Tonegawa was honored for his discoveries relating to the structure of the body's immune system. There is more evidence of the increasing popularity of home equity loans. Karen Stone, in for Stephen Ogg, has our economics report.
Good morning. According to the latest ABC News Money Magazine poll, 13 million American homeowners plan to take out home equity loans by the end of the year, and another 6 million are seriously considering them. But that still leaves 80% of American homeowners not planning to take advantage of the loans. And according to Money Magazine, women still lag behind men when it comes to understanding and utilizing their personal finances. Women, says the magazine, have less money, worry about it more, and are less informed about money management techniques. Coming up on this week's business calendar, Wednesday, watch for the merchandise trade balance for August to be reported. Many analysts expect the deficit to narrow to about $14 billion, down from July's level of $16 billion worth. Thursday, business inventories for August are expected to show an increase, while retail sales for September are also expected to edge up. Friday, the producer price index for last month is likely to show an increase, so is industrial production. Some analysts expect September's level to show a 0.4% increase over August. Finally this week, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD, is launching a Drive for Life campaign with Volkswagen. Ads appearing across the country will announce the goal, to get Americans not to drink and drive on October 24th. And that's a look at the economy this morning.
Finally, pro football strike talks have broken off. No new negotiations are scheduled. Today, players' representatives will meet in Chicago. Yesterday's fill-in game had bigger crowds than last week's, an average of 25,000. That is, of course, still way down from a normal NFL Sunday. That's our news. Joan, Spencer?
All right, Jed, thank you very much. Right now it's time for the weather. With Spencer Christian, what's it look like?
Oh, well, most of the nation is having nice weather today, but we got this tropical storm that's down just south of Florida right now. That's going to spell some nasty weather for that region.
Right.
Let's stroll over and take a look at the jet stream, first of all, and boy, what sharp dips we've got here, like a roller coaster today. Nice out in the northwest, a little stormy in the southwest, and the jet stream dips sharply southward. Cool and dry over most of the northeastern quadrant of the nation. Here's the big storm. Tropical Storm Floyd, centered right now about 120 miles southwest of Key West, Florida, moving due northward at about 10 miles per hour. By 6 or 7 o'clock this evening, this storm will move on coast around the Fort Myers area, packing winds right now around 60 miles per hour with gusts up to 80 miles per hour. Tides will be 3 to 5 feet above normal when the storm moves inland. It'll dump 5 to 10 inches of rainfall over most inland areas. A very, very dangerous storm and gaining strength right now. Now, for most of the nation today, it's going to be partly to mostly sunny and pleasant, sort of cool here in the northeast, high temperatures mainly in the 40s and 50s. It warms up a bit as you move westward into the plains and the far west. Down in the southwest, though, the remnants of what was Hurricane Ramon will bring heavy rainfall into the southwest. There could be some local flooding in that region. That's a look at the national weather picture, and here's a look at the weather where you are.
Good morning from Channel 31, Eye on Weather. Expect improving weather conditions today across the valley. Becoming mostly sunny by the afternoon, winds out of the north at 15 and a high of only 63.
And we'll have more on the big storm in the next half hour. Joan?
All right, thank you, Spencer. It is now 9 minutes after. In the baseball playoff, the San Francisco Giants and Minnesota Twins are in the catbird seats. The Giants beat the St. Louis Cardinals 6-3 yesterday to take a 3-2 lead in the National League Series. And the Twins beat the Detroit Tigers 5-3 last night to move ahead 3-1 in the American League Series. Our playoff correspondent, Willie Stargell, was on hand for that game. He joins us this morning from WXYZ-TV in Detroit. Good morning, Willie.
Good morning, Joan.
I don't imagine there's a whole lot of joy there in Motown today.
Well, there wasn't much joy going on in Detroit, but there was certainly an awful lot of joy going on in the Minnesota clubhouse. And I guess for one reason, if nothing else, for a lot of these young players, this is the first time for them in the playoffs. And last night, I had a chance to talk with Greg Gagne, and I wanted to know what was going through his mind during these pressure games.
The thoughts that go through your mind out here, you know, you have to have confidence out here to play. You have to believe in yourself. Sometimes there's doubts, and you get down and discouraged sometimes, and you have to forget about them. You have to believe, you know, keep believing and keep believing. And and just go out there and do it.
2 very big hits tonight. Could have been 3. Your contributions, give us a little talk about that.
Well, I'm just real happy right now. That first of all, that we won the game. You know, it's a battle out there. A lot of things go through your mind and everything. I'm just happy that I could contribute to a winning cause tonight.
The Puck, as his teammates affectionately refer to him as, been doing it all year, and tonight he got a great big home run. It did wonders for himself and, of course, for his teammates. Kirby, in the 3rd inning, that big home run to tie up the ball game. But what did that do for you personally?
Well, I've been struggling the whole series, Will. And I think I was starting to think a little bit too much at the plate instead of just going up and doing it. And I just went up and just let the bat go. That time was a good pitch for Frank Sonata, but I went down and got it.
Tell me about the team reaction here.
Well, the team is great, Will. I mean, when you come into a series, nobody expected us to win the West. We're underdogs here in the league championship series, and Tom Kelly just told everybody, just go out and just play the way you've been playing all year, and, that's what we've been doing.
You said something about Tom Kelly. Could you just talk briefly about him for a moment, Kirby?
Well, he's the kind of manager, Will, that, back in your day, I think you would have enjoyed playing for him. He doesn't ask much of you. He asks you to just come to the park, prepare yourself to play, and give 100%. And that's all you can do, and that's the guys are responding to that.
Does the team feel that they can win 5 now, right here?
I think so. I think you got to feel like that. You got to give this push right now. We got to come out here tomorrow. We ain't going to try to lose the game tomorrow. We're going to be trying to win it, and maybe we'll taste it. I think we got that taste right now. We just have to go out and do it and be hungry tomorrow.
Willie, thinking about the Tigers' loss, I just have to ask you about Darrell Evans. It was just not his night last night. What happened?
Well, Darrell Evans did have a tough night last night. You know, getting picked off in the 6th inning was a huge mistake. That it came back to haunt the Tigers. And right after that, Sparky moved him from 1st to 3rd, where he played as awkward as he could. And we all have these kind of days that Darrell had last night. And as a player, you just don't want to have it in a game like this. It's just too important for the Tigers. But Darrell has been through this before, and, he's a professional. Quietly, he's their team leader, and this is the team that has the best record in baseball. So there's a lot of professionals. They're looking forward to going out there today and doing the things they've been doing all year.
All right, Willie, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Of course, the National League will be back in St. Louis tomorrow night for Game 6 also. Coming up right now on 13 after the hour, yesterday's game march on Washington right after this. Usual look at the Constitution with Richard Dreyfuss coming up in our next half hour.
And it's 16 minutes after the hour. For the first time since 1979, they marched yesterday. It was called the National March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights, a rally for equal treatment and a demand for government help in fighting AIDS. Yesterday was also a time for mourning, a sunrise ceremony to unfurl an enormous quilt with the name of someone who died of AIDS on each panel. The panels, months in the making, and Hattie Kaufman followed the project to Washington from its beginnings across the continent.
Shoppers in San Francisco found something different caught their eye in the window of Neiman Marcus department store. It was not the latest fashion, but names of the latest victims of AIDS. Names stitched in fabric, displayed openly. The windows, which were supposed to hold merchandise, held instead a memorial.
We felt this was something that we had these big windows, we could give this exposure. It was just a natural. It just seemed so obvious once the idea struck us that we should do it. Some of them are obviously made by people who are almost professional sewers. Others are very, very hand-done and almost amateurish. But what comes through is they're all done with such love.
The name panels may be sewn for loved ones or perhaps for strangers. This woman never knew the 2-year-old baby Jessica, who died of AIDS after a blood transfusion. But the woman thought the child should be remembered. Others stitch in memory of those they knew well. It was a year ago Good Morning America visited Andrew Finocchio. 2 months later, he passed away. Ron Cordova cared for Finocchio through his illness and created this panel in his honor.
It was like a release of a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, a celebration of his life. I took care of him for like 12 months before he died. And actually, the panel is like a painting that he did. It really explained a lot about him, about where he was at, because he was like this loving person, but then there was this like deep sadness and helplessness over this disease that he a lot of times pretended not to have. But he kept on living. That's the thing. That's like what I learned so much. You take care of somebody like this for a long time and you learn.
Hoping to share what they've learned, thousands have gathered here on the Capitol Mall in Washington, D.C. They're laying out the name panels, now sewn together to form a patchwork quilt in memory of the victims of the disease.
This is a way of saying thanks, I suppose.
Rob Hale, Stephen Richter.
At daybreak, the names were read.
Roger Reinhold, Jose Salz.
A name for each panel, a name for each person remembered.
My son's panel is here, and I am here in his memory, and also to fight for the rights of all the other patients right now.
I'm sick of seeing my friends die. It's a ridiculous idea that we can't get any federal money or any more federal money.
On our workshop in San Francisco and here again today, there's so much pain and so much sorrow. And we're getting through it, and we're loving each other, and we're laughing, and we're continuing on with our lives.
And joining us now from Washington are Pat Norman, one of the national co-chairs of yesterday's march, and Congressman Gary Studs, one of just two openly gay members of the House, and one of those who was at the front of the marchers yesterday. Good morning to the two of you. Pat, the first march since 1979, why now? What specifically is the gay movement after?
Well, we have to have our rights. The AIDS epidemic happened and left us because people discriminated against people who are believed to be just about the lowest in this country. If it had been other people, we would never have had to deal with this kind of problem. Now, with the Hardwick decision as well, taking away our privacy, we decided this is the time to act.
Congressman Studs, AIDS overlays all of this, in effect, and while it draws sympathy, doesn't it make getting equal rights politically all the tougher for the gay movement?
I don't think so. I don't think we really know the answer to that question yet. I think if there's a message that comes through all of the components of this weekend, the most moving of which certainly you just showed in that last segment, it is that members of Congress to whom this appeal was addressed, as well as the President, who, stereotypes notwithstanding, are for the most part very decent men and women who know what is right and want to do the right thing, but sometimes have the trouble finding the courage to do what they darn well know is right, that it's okay in a conventional political sense at this point to do what's right. There was an enormous cross-section of America out there yesterday, I think reflecting the real decency and common sense of the people of this country, saying, Mr. President, members of the Congress, have the courage of your own convictions, do what you darn well know is right, get out there, do adequate funding, provide us some leadership, assume the best in us, assume our capacity to respond with compassion and with love. Don't pander to what you fear is the worst in us, which is our fear and ignorance and prejudice, which is also in all of us. I think people are just demanding that we have some semblance of leadership in this country at a time of crisis.
Well, I know, for instance, one of the goals of the movement has been to expand the 1964 Civil Rights Act to prevent discrimination based on sexual preference. Is there any real reasonable opportunity of that happening in this Congress?
I don't anticipate in all candor that happening in this Congress, but I must say that it's, if one thinks about it, it's really remarkable that in 1987 in the United States, one is still debating whether or not fundamental civil rights ought to be extended to all American citizens. In an awful lot of senses, one would like to think that debate was well behind us. It is not. We don't have an equal rights amendment to guarantee fundamental civil liberties to 51% of our population in terms of women at this point. The approximately 10% who are gay and lesbian are coming along in their own historical time, but it is more than a shame at this point. It is a tragedy of the most extraordinary proportions that it's taken as long as it has.
Pat Norman, is the problem legislative or is it attitudinal? Is there still an attitudinal hurdle that is huge, that has to be overcome in most people's minds?
Yes, it certainly is, and that's one of the other reasons that we've marched here specifically. We believe that by reaching out to the rest of the nation and showing who we are, really, which is basically your children, your mothers and fathers, cousins and sisters and brothers, that all of us will begin to know each other better and change the kinds of myths that people have conjured up in their minds.
Pat Norman, Congressman Studs, thanks both for being with us this morning. Nice to have you here. It's coming up on 23 minutes after the hour, and we'll be back.
From Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Good morning, America.
Well, good morning. I'm Charles Gibson. Happy holiday to you all.
Yes, and I'm Joan Lennon. It is Monday, October 12th, Columbus Day.
And for those of you who got up early just to watch, we're most appreciative. And we're going to talk about somebody. He is not a political candidate, this fellow we're going to be talking about this morning. But this morning, in the spirit of scrutiny, we're going to find out just who this guy, Christopher Columbus, really was. I mean, he put on his resume, first to sail to America. Now, we know that's not true. There were other people who'd sailed here beforehand. So we'll check out his resume. We'll find out there are many, many unanswered questions about his life and his voyage. But he did make it to the New World, although he thought it was Asia. And he didn't really come on this day, although we celebrate it now. So we'll give you the full story in Truth and Journalism in just a moment.
Yes, so go back to bed. That's right. It's not really Columbus Day now. And the story of the Constitution has been told a lot in the last few months, but not quite the way it will be tonight in a very unusual TV special hosted by Richard Dreyfuss. And Chantal talks with him. Also, a very unusual look at the city of Miami through the sharp eyes of author Joan Didion. Right now, though, Edie Magnus has the news for us. Edie, good morning.
Good morning, Joan, and good morning, everyone. Tropical storm Floyd is churning up the Gulf of Mexico, aiming for southwest Florida and the Keys, packing winds of 70 miles per hour. Hurricane conditions are expected by early evening. The storm brushed the western tip of Cuba late last night. Residents of Key West and vicinity have already cleared market shelves of batteries, flashlights, and staple groceries. The tourists are packing up and heading inland. The number 2 man at the White House today makes it official he wants to be number 1. Vice President George Bush will become the 5th Republican officially to declare his bid for the presidential nomination. Bush already has raised some $13 million for his campaign. In the Philippines, militant trade union groups led by leftists have begun a 5-day strike in a fight for a higher minimum wage. As Mark Litkey reports, the strike comes at a time of growing disenchantment with the policies of President Corazon Aquino.
At the Jeepney Coffee Shop in Manila, an informal gathering called the 365 Club, where local politicians air their views over breakfast every day of the year. These days, those views are increasingly gloomy.
For the country, I'm deeply worried.
There's a growing fear in the Philippines that President Aquino is losing control, unable to stop assaults on her government from the left and the right, losing support in the middle as well. The people power that swept Aquino into office is clearly in decline.
They don't have too much confidence in the Aquino regime within the short span because they haven't seen the government's ability to overcome.
Yes, Aquino has overcome 5 coup attempts, but the capital is still bristling with troops amidst a barrage of ominous rumors. Another coup attempt coming, threats of martial law, new assaults by the communists. In fact, the communist insurgents recently have launched some of their boldest attacks in years, including the destruction of key bridges on the main island of Luzon, while military rebels involved in recent coup attempts remain at large, attacking Aquino through the local media. In recent weeks, President Aquino has tried to project a stronger, more decisive image.
She has been getting rid of people in her cabinet who were responsible for the divisiveness, and she's trying to get her armed forces united under one leadership.
How much time does she have?
Not very much time.
Few here doubt President Aquino's good intentions, but what the Philippines needs now is strong leadership and stability. If the Aquino administration can't provide that stability soon, good intentions won't count for very much. Mark Litkey, ABC News, Manila.
Key negotiators for NFL team owners have broken off talks with the striking players. No new discussions are scheduled. Union Chief Gene Upshaw is meeting with player representatives in Chicago today. 3 weeks into the strike, only 7 minor issues have been resolved. Some 2,800 striking NBC employees will vote this week on a tentative settlement package offered by the company. Negotiators for the National Association of Broadcast Employees and Technicians agreed to submit the package to the membership without a recommendation. NABET members have been on strike for 15 weeks. Finally, the great search for the Loch Ness Monster has ended inconclusively in Scotland. 20 boats swept back and forth across the Scottish Lake for 3 days, probing the water with the latest in American sonar equipment. All they found were several mysterious blips on the sonar screen, which appeared to show something big and alive moving slowly about 600 feet down. And that's our news. And Charlie, I'm sure for all the tourist businesses in the area there, the inconclusive ending is probably the best one.
Absolutely, but Nessie was celebrating the Columbus Day weekend, taking it easy down there watching the playoffs, and didn't come up for the votes. Too bad, guys. You can come back later. Thanks very much, Edie. It's now 35 minutes after the hour, and in a moment, Spencer Christian and the National Weather Forecast. Stay around for that.
Well, we've still got contrasting weather patterns across the 48 contiguous states today. High temperatures out west will still be quite warm and almost summer-like, mainly in the 70s over the Rockies, including the northern Rockies. Some 80s and 90s down in the desert southwest. Here in the east and especially in the northeast, quite cool. Highs only in the 40s over a large portion of the northeast, 50s and 60s as you move westward and southward. Partly to mostly sunny skies will dominate the nation's weather scene today, but we do have a trouble spot down in Florida as Tropical Storm Floyd is pushing towards the southwest Florida coast right now, packing winds around 60 miles per hour with gusts up to 80 miles per hour. The storm is expected to move right across the Florida Peninsula this evening and out towards the Atlantic by tomorrow. It's going to be a major, major rain producer. And of course, in the desert southwest, we have some rain building up from the remnants of what was Hurricane Ramon. That's a look at the national weather picture. Here's a look at the weather where you are.
Good morning from Channel 31, Ion Weather. Expect improving weather conditions today across the valley, becoming mostly sunny by the afternoon, winds out of the north at 15 and a high of only 63.
More on Tropical Storm Floyd in the next half hour. Charlie?
All right, Spencer, thank you very much. 37 minutes after the hour, Richard Dreyfuss and friends take a most unusual look at the Constitution after this.
Good Morning America is brought to you by the Fun Ships of Carnival Cruise Lines, the most popular cruise line in the world.
It is now 7:39. Well, it may not be the first TV special on the Constitution this year, but it may be the most unusual. Chantal recently spoke with Richard Dreyfuss about his ABC TV special on the Constitution, which airs tonight, and she asked him how it was so different.
It's an entertainment about the Constitution and the ideas within it, and it's funny, and it's enjoyable, and it's a little tough-minded here and there.
Excuse me. Sorry. What is the Constitution?
What did you say?
I said I don't understand what you're talking about.
Just a minute, Doc. Excuse me.
Huh?
Do you think you could help me out a little bit in this scene?
Sure.
Now then, you were saying?
You gotta tell us what the Constitution is.
How did it come about?
It came about because I have always had an interest in history, thinking always that I would teach history when I retired. And then I thought a year ago, 2 years ago, why wait? And so I went to Disney, and I started to put together an idea about a special, and we got Apple involved, etc. That's how it happened.
You were greatly responsible for pulling this whole cast together for the Constitution special. So what do? You just pick up the phone and say, so, hey, Henry Winkler, will you be in my special? Is that easy?
This was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Not producing the show and not writing the show and not doing anything in the show. It was asking people to do the show. I'm not good at that. What made it easier was that every time I asked, they said yes, and that made it okay. But still, calling people was tough for me. It's all right down here in black and white. No kidding. Take a look. See? Great stuff, huh?
I don't know if it's great stuff.
Why not?
I'm not sure it's great stuff.
What do you mean you're not sure?
I can't read.
Huh? We'll teach you to read.
Don't you think there's a great message to this Constitution special?
We have our hands on our lives because of this document. Yes, there's all these modern debates about the rich and the monopolies and television and advertising and all of these subtle ways that we control one another. And those things in one form or another have been around for as long as the sun rises. But what was new in 1787 was not just the theory of popular sovereignty, but was that a group of men, for all of their reasons, created it, put it into practice, and washed their hands and said, job well done. Now that is an act of incredible revolution. You know, it doesn't matter that they were rich or that they were landowners or that they were property owners or that they were slave owners. It doesn't matter. They started a little engine, and that engine not only is still working, it has changed the agenda of the Western world.
And now it is 42 minutes after Miami through the eyes of author Joan Didion right after this. It is a rather unorthodox look at the city and its history. Steve Fox recently visited Miami with Joan Didion as his guide. And good morning to you.
Good morning, Joni. Joan Didion has a penchant for finding and chronicling the most intriguing and topical subjects of the day. During the 60s, she wrote memorably about the counterculture. In the 1970s, she looked at the relationships between men and women. That's back when men and women were having relationships, you remember that? And a few years back, she wrote one of the first books about our involvement in El Salvador. So it's not surprising that the subject of her latest book is Miami. But Joan Didion's Miami is not the shiny and glamorous city we think we know from Miami Vice.
This is a very lively city. It's one of the few cities in America where you have any sense of the rest of the world, of international life. It is an infinitely interesting place to be.
The place, Miami. The speaker, Joan Didion. Her latest book describes the nonviolent takeover of one of our top cities by waves of immigrants and refugees from Latin America. Miami is 53% Hispanic now, mainly Cuban, but with other Latinos as well. They're remaking Miami in ways other Americans may find hard to accept. Who shops in these markets? Is it just the Cubans or the Anglos down here?
Just Cubans. I would be very surprised to see an Anglo here. The Anglo community here lives quite apart from the Cuban community.
They don't mingle at all?
No.
What do you attribute that separation between the two cultures to? Why did that happen?
At the time the Cubans came, the Anglos just ignored them. If they thought it was another immigrant group, they didn't think that they were going to become a dominant culture, and so they just didn't pay any attention, and by the time they started paying attention, it was too late.
But the Anglos don't come into the Cuban areas to shop, to buy food, to buy...
They don't cook with plantains, say.
So there's that. I, for example, don't even know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
What is this? Mame? Mame?
I still don't know.
Mame.
Yeah. I remember looking in the Miami Herald food section week after week after week after week. They never gave any Cuban recipes.
It's the dominant population, but no Cuban recipes.
Yeah.
In the first chapter of your book, you point out that 2 former Cuban presidents are buried in this cemetery in Miami. Why did you find that significant?
Well, presidents of countries aren't usually buried in other countries, and so it seemed odd to find 2 presidents buried not only in another country, but in the same city and in the same cemetery. Florida has always been a kind of apron on a Cuban stage where people, when they left the stage in a fury or at a dramatic moment, where they came to wait was Florida. And then they would scheme and plan ways to get back on stage.
26 years ago, Cuban exiles sought to get back on stage by deposing Fidel Castro, but came to grief at the Bay of Pigs. They had only limited help from the United States, although they had been promised much more. Is the Bay of Pigs ancient history in this community, or is it something that people talk about a lot, about every day?
It's a very, very living thing. It's really the central narrative of the entire exile, and so really of the Miami community. It's something that simply has to do with everything people think about their situation today, about the way in which they've been betrayed, they think, by the United States. You hear it from everybody you talk to.
Everybody? Even the young people?
Even the young people.
People who weren't born when the Bay of Pigs happened?
I didn't talk to anybody I didn't get this sense from. They are extremely nationalistic. They believe passionately in Cuba as their birthright. To some extent, they have the natural feelings of exiles, even in this generation.
Are they different from other immigrants in that they want to go back and expect that they will go back?
Yeah, that's why I don't think of them as immigrants. I think of them as exiles who probably won't go back.
Well, is that in fact true? Is it true that the Cubans have not assimilated? Is there a second culture that's come into ascendancy?
There is a dual culture here, yeah.
Is that unique in American cities or
I think
unusual?
probably it is, yeah. I think we haven't seen that in other groups of foreign nationals who have come here. They have become gradually, over generations, become part of the existing structure.
And here, what has happened?
Here, another structure was built up, a dual structure.
And has, in fact, become more powerful, more influential?
It is a dominant culture, yeah. And a very lively one.
Now, Joan Didion said that she picked to write about Miami because at the time it was the most interesting place going. It was a place of intrigue and mystery, kind of like a modern Casablanca. She said today the place she'd love to be, the place she'd love to write about, is the Persian Gulf. She says that's what's hot now.
But there really is no other city in this country that has the dynamics going on like Miami.
She thought Miami was fascinating,
Yeah.
and she admired the Cuban culture, the one that's become the ascendant culture. She said it's lively, brought something to the city.
All right, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will be right back after this from Oscar Mayer.
7 minutes before the hour now, a quote from a sailor's log. The moon rose in the east shortly before midnight. Then at 2 hours after midnight, the Pinta fired a cannon, my prearranged signal for the sighting of land. The first man to sight land was Rodrigo de Triana, a seaman from Lepe. The writer, of course, Christopher Columbus. The date, October 12, 1492. Most of what we do know about that first voyage is contained in the log of Christopher Columbus, which has just been published by the International Marine Publishing Company of Maine in a new translation by Robert Fuzon, Professor Emeritus of Geography at the University of South Florida, and he joins us now. Fascinating stuff reading his logs, but we really know very little about Christopher Columbus, don't we?
Very little. A man of mystery.
How come?
An enigma.
How come?
I think he was covering up something, and I have no idea what. But he didn't tell his son, he didn't put it in writing, and we really don't know much about the guy.
And the log is pretty spare, actually, in what he writes about that voyage, isn't it?
Well, it's an abstract, what we have. The original has been lost. We've lost the original. We've lost a copy of the original. We have an abstract of a copy. And so we're working with third generation material.
Which you have put in very readable English in this book. Interesting part, there's been so much controversy over where Columbus landed. Nobody's ever been quite sure. You have a new theory.
Yes, I go along with the National Geographic theory that came out last year, that Samana Key is the island he landed, which is 65 miles south of the traditional spot.
Why do you think he wound up further south than we've known so far?
2 or 3 reasons. National Geographic plotted the route across the Atlantic. That's one line of evidence, using the best available data at that time and computer technology. That's one of 5 or 6 lines of evidence that they had. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that when you start on any island and take the journal or the log, you must be able to follow it and get to Cuba. And if you don't start at Samana, you won't get to Cuba without running aground or running ashore or not reaching the next island.
You mean his subsequent sailings after he left wherever it was he landed and went to Cuba? You figure that from plotting that, he had to have left from Samana rather than
Absolutely. There are about 36 large islands in the Bahamas and about 700 little ones. If you took any one of these and did a hit and miss track, started with all of these one by one and used the journal, the only one that's going to fit and articulate with the other islands will be Samana. Nothing else will fit.
What do you learn about Columbus the man, whether he was covering up anything or not, from reading the logs?
He was a very humane fella. He was a tolerant captain. He was probably the best sailor of his time and probably the best dead reckoning sailor of history. His treatment of the Indians on the first voyage, the things he said about the Indians, his concern for his own men on the voyage, his concern for his family when he was in a storm on the way home. I see him as a very tolerant, humane, certainly mystical and egotistical, but I see the fellow as a very normal human being.
Great sailor, but he thought he was in Asia when he landed,
everybody
right?
did. So this was a geographically logical thing.
He thought Cuba was a peninsula of Asia, and never did know that he hadn't landed in Asia until the day he died.
But no one in Europe knew this was not Asia until about 1515, 1520, and it was continually mapped as Asia until about 1550 by some people. So this was geographically sound reasoning.
It does say in the logs he landed on October 12th, but I gather when you switch calendars, it really
calendar was changed. The Vatican changed the calendar after the voyage to from the Julian to the Gregorian.
So we're really doing this on the wrong day.
We should be doing it on the 21st. It's the only U.S. holiday that wasn't changed. Washington's birthday was changed, for example.
That's right. Well, all right, Dr. Fuson, thank you very much for being with us. Fascinating about Columbus.
Thank you.
It's now 57 minutes after. We'll be right back. Coming up in our next hour, the Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop, answering critical questions about AIDS.
Also, the first TV roundup of singing cowboys Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, and Dale Evans.
So stick around. We'll be right back.
Morning in the headlines, Vice President George Bush makes it official today. He will be a candidate for president.
And talks between the NFL players and the owners have broken off as replacement players played their second weekend of games.
Florida now bracing itself for Tropical Storm Floyd, expected to crash onshore early this evening.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joan London. Happy Columbus Day.
I'm Charles Gibson. October 12th. Hit it on the nose on Monday right now. That
And
you always know, right?
That's right.
Watch football this weekend?
You must have watched a whole lot of games.
Baseball. No
Baseball.
football. No football. I can't believe there was a Redskins-Giants game. I didn't watch it. The Giants. I heard them called in the
I'm a
paper the other
Tigers
day.
fan, so I don't want to talk about it. We have a lot coming up, though, in this half hour. We've seen a lot of Surgeon General C. Everett Koop on television these days. He has a reason, of course. AIDS, it is obviously America's #1 health crisis, and one that unfortunately is still magnified by misconceptions and downright ignorance. This month is National AIDS Prevention and Awareness Month. Tonight, the Surgeon General hosts a cable television special on AIDS, and he will join us to talk about it.
Also, we're going to have a report this morning on how computers have been enlisted in the battle to reduce the American waistline. And we'll hear from someone who has to be America's best-known fitness guru, that, of course, Jane Fonda. A bit later in the program, Roy Rogers, Dale Evans, Gene Autry, back in the saddle, happy trails, all that. They're also on the tube again. Right now, Jed Duvall on the tube. He has the news from Washington. Jed, good morning.
Good morning, Charlie. Joan?
Morning.
Good morning, everyone. Tropical Storm Floyd is bearing down on Florida's west coast after moving into the Gulf of Mexico from the western Caribbean. With steady winds of 70 miles an hour, Floyd could become a hurricane at any time. Forecasters expect landfall later today. In Florida, Jerry Levine of station WPLG in Miami is standing by live. Jerry?
Jed, there are plenty of gusty winds right now. However, there is no rain. All things considered, it's relatively calm here. But from looking at the radar and from talking to civil defense officials, I think that we can safely say that this is literally the calm before the storm. We got here at 4 o'clock this morning. There was no mass exodus of people from Key West. People are planning to ride this one out, and it's not just a personal decision that they're making. Civil defense officials have been telling people for the last 24 hours that they should, in fact, sit tight, and that is what they are doing. Originally, it was forecasted that the effects of Floyd would be felt here around 10 o'clock. That's been moved up. They now say it should be about 9:30 when we start feeling the full brunt of this thing. As I said, right now it's a little gusty, but that's about it. Last night there was some boarding up of businesses. There was a little bit of flooding. There was some wave activity and lots of rain. However, no real damage. And we're just standing by now waiting for this thing and just whatever the effects are going to be, I guess we're going to feel them possibly full force when they get here.
Jerry, are the Keys equipped to take such a blow?
Right now, civil defense officials are doing everything they can to make adjustments. There was a little bit of a problem here, apparently, and that was not their fault, it seems, but just a time element. There was no hurricane watch. It simply became a hurricane warning very quickly, and they were not prepared to evacuate people. Now, they have realized that there are some areas that are susceptible to facing major problems, and on Geiger Key, There is a group of mobile homes where there are county officials right now trying to move those people off the low-lying areas and get them to safety. But there are no shelters open here, and people in Key West are pretty stoic, and they're staying indoors, and I guess they're going to take this thing.
Thank you very much, Jerry Levine. Here's Spencer Christian now with the official forecast about Tropical Storm Floyd. Spencer?
Okay, Jed, well, Tropical Storm Floyd is almost at hurricane level right now. It's got winds around 70 miles per hour. Once it moves inland, rainfall amounts will be anywhere between 5 and 10 inches. Fort Myers area will have high tide between 5 and 7 p.m. today, and tides with the storm are going to be 3 to 5 feet above that normal level, so flooding is more likely to take place during that time between 5 and 7 p.m. Tornadoes will be spawned by the storm. Hurricane watches and warnings in effect now for most of coastal Florida, the Gulf Coast, and portions of the Atlantic coast. And, of course, the storm is headed northward right now towards the Fort Myers area, expected to move inland around 6 p.m. It probably will be at hurricane force by that time. That's a look at the storm for now. More details a little bit later when I have the complete forecast. Jed?
Spencer, thank you. A Japanese geneticist today won the Nobel Prize for Medicine. Susuma Tonegawa, a researcher at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was named for his discoveries on the structure of the body's immune system. The award comes with about $340,000 and priceless prestige. An estimated 200,000 gays and lesbians, including many victims of AIDS, converged on Washington yesterday for a demonstration. Gays and their supporters marched from the White House to the Capitol. They called for more government funding for AIDS research and for a law barring discrimination against homosexualities. Jim and Tammy Baker this week are planning a nationwide tour as they maneuver to regain control of PTL. The man who just departed as caretaker, Jerry Falwell, says folks will wish that he and his group had not left.
Now the partners have come to realize we were their friends, that we were not the enemy. We did not want to sell it. We wanted to make it work, and we were within weeks of victory.
PTL is $65 million in debt. Creditors reportedly want immediate payment and would sell off the assets to pay the debt. Here's a look at the news calendar. George Bush makes it official today. He's running for president. Bush will attempt to become the first sitting vice president to be elected president since Martin Van Buren in 1836. The 21st Annual Country Music Association Awards will be given out tonight in Nashville. The Minnesota Twins can win their first American League pennant since 1965 with a win over the Tigers today. The Twins beat Detroit 5-3 last night and lead the American League playoffs 3-1. No game in the National League playoffs today. This evening on World News Tonight, a look inside what may be America's worst prison. NFL player representatives are meeting in Chicago today as the football strike goes into its 4th week. Ned Potter reports management broke off talks yesterday after reaching a negotiating impasse.
In football, irresistible force often meets immovable object, but that is not the goal of labor negotiations. It happened in these, NFL management walking out on the striking players union.
I think that they have overcommitted or overreached in any number of positions. I think they have to reassess that.
Free agency remains a major stumbling block. The union would like to make it easier for players to seek job offers from other teams.
We felt that we handled some of the small issues, but when it got to the bigger issues, they have still taken the same position. They have not moved one bit from their opening proposal.
Meanwhile, fill-in games were played around the league, some sloppy, but some much better attended than last week's. Management bargainer Jack Donlin, heading home to New York, would make no guess on the resumption of talks. Gene Upshaw headed to a players' rep meeting, saying management engineered the breakdown to weaken the will of the strikers. Ned Potter, ABC News, Washington.
That's the news. Joan and Spencer?
All right, thank you, Jed. All right, right now, Spencer's going to be, it's still a tropical storm. I'm not going to talk about the hurricane yet.
Not yet, but it's close to being at hurricane strength. Most of the nation, though, is experiencing really calm weather today, but, of course, Florida's going to get hard hit. And here's the way it looks by way of satellite. Let's look at the entire 48 contiguous states. First of all, you see this huge mass of clouds off the East Coast and right on down into the Gulf Coast. And, of course, the storm is centered down here. Let's talk about what's happening around the rest of the nation. First of all, it will be a partly to mostly sunny day for much of the nation. A little cool up in the northwest, some low clouds here in the mid-Atlantic region. Temperatures, high temperatures here today will reach only to the 40s and 50s in the northeastern quadrant of the nation. As you push westward into the plains, it becomes milder, and then much warmer out west. It'll be in the 70s over the Rockies. And the remnants of what was once Hurricane Ramon, which has fizzled out now in the Pacific, those remnants are moving in off the Pacific and triggering showers. There could be an inch and a half of rainfall in portions of Southern California and Southern Nevada, which is very unusual for that part of the country. Now, closing in on Tropical Storm Floyd, which is packing winds now at 70 miles per hour, almost at hurricane level. The storm is centered about 100 miles southwest of Key West, Florida, moving due northward towards the Florida Peninsula, towards the southwest coast. It'll crash inland early this evening, and of course is likely to produce some flooding, and some schools in Monroe County and Collier County already have been closed for this morning in southwestern Florida. It's going to be a very, very nasty day for much of the Florida Peninsula. That's a look at the national weather picture. Here's a look at the weather where you are.
Good morning from Channel 31, Eye on Weather. Expect improving weather conditions today across the valley, becoming mostly sunny by the afternoon, winds out of the north at 15 and a high of only 63.
One final look at today's weather in the next half hour. Joan?
All right, thank you, Spencer. 9 minutes after right now. Every day there are new developments involving computers which change people's lives. Our science and technology editor, Gene Cernan, teams up now with our fitness director, Dan Isaacson, to find out what's new in high-tech workout equipment. Here's what they found.
Many people who are really serious about fitness feel that they need a personal trainer or even a coach to help them achieve their goals. But today, the world of high-tech has brought us robotic coaches. They're called humanoids. And what's really amazing is they still manage to maintain that one-on-one, all-important personal approach to training.
Welcome to the Powerhouse Fitness System Play.
These humanoid coaches are telling you what to do, how to do it. You don't have to guess how much should I lift today, how little should I lift. They're doing all that for you. All you have to do is show up and participate, and they do the rest.
Rick Dyer, creator of Dragon's Lair, one of the most successful video games ever, is also one of the inventors of this talking fitness equipment. So within each one of these workout devices, there is a computer, and then, as I understand it, a master computer.
That's correct.
Which compiles all your information.
To give you an idea of how these things work, most computers think serially. They do one thing at a time. But what the PowerSize system is doing is it's thinking in parallel. Like right now when I'm talking to you, you're listening to me and you're at the same time thinking of what's your next question going to be, how are you going to respond to it. You're thinking in parallel, many different thoughts at once, and these work on the same principle. They think in parallel.
When I met Dan Isaacson here at the Phoenix Fitness Resort in Houston, Texas, he was not only well-versed in the techniques of these high-tech coaches, but he even knew them personally by name.
Gene, let me introduce you, in fact, to Coach Wally. Now, Wally is going to give you an ID number. It's going to take your weight.
Although the computers behind the system are highly sophisticated, its coaches are more user-friendly, with names like Wally Weight Scale, Chester Chest Press, Hairy Leg Extension, Curly Arm Curl, and even Tie the Thigh.
Good morning, Gene.
Good morning. He knows me.
I know, it's amazing.
Is this a gimmick just to get people in here?
I don't think it is. I think certainly it has its own whistles and bells.
Yeah.
But as I said, it really is great when it comes to education, motivation, feedback. And what's great about it is that we have to remember in the fitness field that really we only have about 20-25% of our population that are actively participating in exercise on a regular basis. So now we have a whole population of sedentary people that need to be motivated. So I'm fascinated from several points of view on this equipment.
The Phoenix Fitness Resort has been working with this system for a little over a year now, and the results appear to be positive.
They kind of goose you along. They've called me Rambo. They've told me Arnold Schwarzenegger just ought to move over. They've said that my mother ought to be proud of me. They've said all sorts of things like that. You know, and I come back to hear what they're going to say to me next.
Go for it.
It's almost as though they're dealing with a human being. I just had a conversation in the hallway a minute ago with a gal who was mad at one of the machines because of the interaction she was having with it. And she was speaking about it as though it was truly a human being. And I was saying, well, now, you know, it is a machine. And she refused to accept that she was dealing with a machine.
You're a fitness expert. How can you use this system to train the people that you work with?
Well, what's going to be interesting about the system is that all the research that is ongoing in the fitness field, when that research data is available to us, this kind of system gets it in instantly. So you don't have to change equipment. They just simply change programs. And that is a huge breakthrough. In fact, it's one of the biggest breakthroughs in the fitness industry, potentially, that I've seen.
High technology plays a part in almost everything we do. But when it comes to staying fit, you never get something for nothing. You still got to pump that iron.
Thank you, Gene and Dan. Right now, 13 after, the Surgeon General on AIDS prevention and awareness, right after this.
It's now 16 minutes after the hour. It seems that you can't repeat the statistics often enough. Since 1981, more than 25,000 Americans have died of AIDS. By 1991, it is estimated another 150,000 will be dead. Clearly the end of the epidemic not yet in sight. This month is National AIDS Prevention and Awareness Month, and starting tonight, HBO is going to be presenting a one-hour special called AIDS, Everything You and Your Family Need to Know, but we're afraid to ask. The program is hosted by the Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop, who joins us this morning from Washington, and with us here in New York is Dr. Robert Wyndham, Assistant Secretary for Health and Human Services, and good morning to the two of you.
Good morning, Charlie.
Dr. Koop, I gather this is not unlike what we did here on the set a few weeks ago, in which we had some students questioning you. I gather you take questions from the public about AIDS, and there are still so many misconceptions. What is the one that you get more than any?
I think the biggest misconception is that people still think that you can pick up AIDS somehow or other by non-sexual casual contact. And I think the thing that bothers most people is the fact that maybe mosquitoes carry the virus. And I would like to assure everybody right now that that is not possible and it is not true.
And how about questions, Dr. Wyndham? What do you get most often? What is it that the public really just doesn't understand?
The understanding that they lack, I believe, is the fear of the children in school. This is one of the current issues of young students that are going to school who have the virus, do not have the disease AIDS, but the fear that other students cannot associate with them. And these children have been discriminated against very much so. And we are concerned about that. And that's why this month of October, our major effort to inform people better.
All right, so Dr. Koop talks about transmission of the disease. You talk about fear for individuals. This is, at my age, this has still been probably the largest public education campaign that I've seen in this country. But it is obviously, Dr. Koop, not getting through.
I think it's getting through better than we think. The difficulty is that we're dealing with a problem where AIDS patients get their disease by behaviors that most people do not engage in and most people do not approve of. That being the case, there is a certain revulsion about the whole thing, and they don't want to know as much as they should, and they tend to deny the things that they hear. And that's why we have to keep on reiterating the message, and that's why it's so important to have something like the HBO thing tonight.
Well, Congressman Studs was here in our first hour. He talked about the fact that, Dr. Koop, you wrote a pamphlet about a year ago that has really all the requisite information in it, ought to be mailed probably to every family in the country, hasn't been. Congressman Studs was saying it should be. Why hasn't the government done that, Dr. Wyndham?
Well, we are distributing it to over 7 or 8 million people now. We have more than that on the list to have the publication printed and sent out. We have other brochures and other printed matter to distribute. So we are doing a lot in the area of the print media.
Well, I've seen Dr. Koop's pamphlet. It's extraordinarily complete.
Right.
Why not send it? Other countries have done that, send information to every family in the country. Why isn't this government doing it?
Well, at this time, Charlie, the question is whether it would be as effective as some people think. We look at the United Kingdom now. They've been reviewing their course of events and think maybe that was not as important as they initially thought it was. So the real question is it really going to be that effective, or is it better to do it in another form of distribution, like through congressional districts, like
congressmen are doing this and senators now.
Well, but they're sending it out, getting it to every family.
That's
Dr.
right.
Coop, shouldn't it go to every family in the country?
Well, I think the advantage of the congressional approach is that they send it to areas that have a high prevalence of AIDS, and I think that the people that should be getting it are probably getting it. Dr. Wyndham has told you that about 8 million copies have gone out already, and there are another 20 million waiting to go, so that we're going to hit a large number of the people who should be listening to it.
I was struck. We had another panel in here a couple of weeks ago, health professionals, doctors. Many of them still, despite, Dr. Coop, your talk about how it can be transmitted, they're still concerned about treating AIDS patients. When doctors are concerned about their dealings and contact with AIDS patients, why shouldn't members of the public be?
Well, I don't know why that is. Again, I think that doctors are human beings, and I think they have some of the same feelings of revulsion about this disease that other people do, and I think that they hope that they won't have to deal with these patients themselves, and therefore when one does come across their path, they're not prepared. The American Medical Association has tried very hard to educate physicians, and I have an editorial appearing in the Journal of the American Medical Association next week, which is really asking physicians to take the lead in facing the issue and representing the problem to the public.
You know, Dr. Wyndham, when so many people in the public say, you know, we're so scared that perhaps the government will say, well, we didn't know in late 1987 just how dangerous this was. And, you know, somebody just said to me, look, in the last 2 weeks, the government has changed its position on cholesterol. We've learned new things about that. Who's to say that the current information about AIDS is correct and that perhaps Dr. Coop is wrong and it can be more easily transmitted than we think? Is that possible? Can that happen?
Anything is possible in that sense, Charlie, but we're giving the facts that we know of today, the most scientific facts and the evidence we have. And like anything, time may disprove those, but we cannot wait for that time. We've got to say what we do know today, and those facts are what we're giving to the people.
Dr. Coop, is that a reassurance to say we say what we know today?
Well, I think it's more than that. You know, there are certain things you know that are not going to happen. Black isn't going to become white and red isn't going to become green. And there can be slight variations in what we say. We know, for example, in the beginning that we had a very fixed idea about what the incubation period was. As time has gone on, we've had to extend that. Now, that's not a major shift. I don't think we're ever going to say, whoops, we made a great mistake, we wish we hadn't told you that. We're going to add a little bit here, take a little bit off there, but the fundamental public health message is not going to change.
All right, Dr. C. Everett Koop, Dr. Robert Wyndham, thank you both for being with us this morning. And the special starts running tonight. I guess they repeated it various times, such as the way of cable, correct, Dr. Koop?
I think it's 3 times this week and maybe more later.
All right, thanks for both of you for being with us. It's coming up in 23 minutes after the hour, and we'll be back.
It's Fleet Week in San Francisco, and from USS Carl Vinson, good morning, America!
Well, good morning, gentlemen. I'm Charles Gibson.
And I'm Joan Lennon. It is Monday, October 12th, Columbus Day.
And we just had Dr. Robert Wyndham for the Department of HHSS on, and he left. He gave me a little thing, little light. You put on. Say ah.
Aw.
Yep. She's
Stay
healthy.
well.
She's all right. With us this half hour, straight shooters, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, and Dale Evans. They are all back in the saddle again. It's been almost 50 years since they first sang to us about the ways of the Wild West. Now they are blazing new trails with a roundup of their movies and memories for television, and they'll be here to talk about all those this morning.
And Jane Fonda is back home again on the video range. She has a new set of exercises out, this time using weights, and in a few minutes we will hear from her. Right now, though, Edie Magnus has the news for us. Edie, good morning.
Good morning, Joan, and good morning, everyone. Vice President George Bush is officially off and running today. Bush left this morning for his hometown of Houston, Texas, where he'll formally launch his second campaign for the presidency. In the face of a just-released Newsweek magazine poll that shows many Americans think him a wimp, Bush told supporters in New Hampshire over the weekend, quote, "You'll see a tiger unleashed." Bush, who has raised some $13 million, is considered the front-runner in the contest for the Republican nomination. Florida's western coast is bracing for Tropical Storm Floyd, expected to become a hurricane by tonight. Rain and thunderstorms hit Key West early this morning, and residents have battened down the hatches and are prepared to ride Floyd out. In Southern California, victims of that severe earthquake more than a week ago are trying to get back on their feet with some help from the federal government. As Bill O'Reilly reports, the road to recovery is paved with red tape.
In Whittier, the area hardest hit by the quake, there was confusion as people tried to find the right source of help.
We go to everybody and nobody knows. We go to the police, they don't know. They say, ask this person. We go to this person, they say, call the city.
It is the federal government which is now providing the answers, as President Reagan has declared the situation a federal disaster. Armed with proof of destruction, the uninsured are seeking loans to cover some of the $177 million in damage that the quake caused. Ralph and Tammy Rodriguez's home is about to be condemned, but they have nowhere to go, so they continue to live in it.
How do you sleep at night? Right at the front door with the front door open and ready to leave at any time because we're scared that it's going to come down.
Just a few blocks away from the Whittier Relief Center, buildings are coming down. More than 20 structures are being demolished, considered too shaky to remain standing.
Federal officials say the first assistance checks will be mailed out in 4 weeks. Until then, the estimated 10,000 Californians who suffered heavy losses during the quake have just one thing to do: wait. Bill O'Reilly, ABC News, Whittier, California.
Angry fans in California went wild last night when a concert by the rap group The Fat Boys was canceled. Some of the crowd at the Kern County Fairground in Bakersfield pulled the event's promoter from his car, beat him, and turned the vehicle over. At least 3 people were arrested. In the Persian Gulf, Iraq claims it hit a large ship near the Iranian coast today, as well as power plants inside Iran. Over the weekend, Iran fired long-range missiles at Baghdad. This comes as the largest convoy yet, 4 tankers, travels north through the waters with the protection of U.S. warships. Senate leaders on both sides of the aisle indicate the full Senate may take up Robert Bork's seemingly doomed Supreme Court nomination by the end of the week. The White House hopes to move quickly in order to submit another candidate. However, Senate Majority Whip Alan Cranston warns the next nominee also will be closely scrutinized. Finally, Philippine President Corazon Aquino says she is going to sue a gossip columnist who accused her of going for cover, quite literally, when alarmed. Aquino took issue with a newspaper charge that she ducked under her bed when she heard gunfire during a coup attempt in August. To dispute the accusation, Aquino invited television cameras into the presidential bedroom, and she even lifted the bed sheets to show how wooden panels would have kept anyone from getting under the bed. Aquino readily admits that in times of crisis, she does turn to prayer. And that's our news. Charlie and Spencer's kind of a sad commentary, I guess, if you have to prove that you don't duck for cover.
Under the bed, yeah. Thanks very much, Edie. And Spencer, you've got, I hate to tell you I told you so.
But you told me.
But I told me so. Twins. Yeah. Minnesota Twins. Look terrific.
And we'll have everything on sports and weather in just a minute. Brought to you by Nabisco, cream of wheat. Time once again for the weather. We'll start with the outlook for the nation. It's going to be a partly to mostly sunny day, and mild weather will prevail over most of the nation. However, we do have the big storm we told you about approaching the Florida coast right now, Tropical Storm Floyd, which is closing in on hurricane strength right now. And once it moves inland, it will produce some flooding and, of course, hurricane-force winds. So it's going to be a very, very bad scene in Florida for much of the day and certainly in the evening hours. But for most of today, it'll be a nice day across the remainder of the nation, except for one more wet spot down in the southwest, where the remains of Hurricane Ramon, which has fizzled out in the Pacific, will be moving inland and creating quite a bit of rainfall in the areas that usually don't get much, like San Diego and Las Vegas, anywhere from a ½ inch to an inch of rainfall likely in those areas today, and there could be some flooding. That's a look at the national weather picture. Here's a look at the weather where you are.
Good morning from Channel 31, Eye on Weather. Expect improving weather conditions today across the valley. Becoming mostly sunny by the afternoon, winds out of the north at 15 and a high of only 63.
And that's our Monday morning weather. Please enjoy. Charlie?
Thank you very much, Spencer. 37 minutes after the hour now. Jane Fonda pumping iron after this.
Good Morning America is brought to you by rich, delicious, mountain-grown Folgers crystals. And by Bounce, for clothes you can't wait to jump into.
Or sit at the end of your bench, feet shoulder-width apart, chest lifted, stomach in, and pelvis tucked under.
Begin with the weights held so your fingers face your outer thighs. And lift, don't bend your wrists, and down. Up to shoulder height and down. Don't raise your shoulders and down.
Doop-de-loop-doop-doo. 39 minutes after the hour, as you can see, someone is in the health club with Fonda. It's our own GMA fitness editor, Dan Isaacson, who gets around earlier with Gene Cernan, now with Jane Fonda. And with Jane Fonda, they show how to pump that iron in Jane Fonda's Workout with Weights, the latest addition to her ever-expanding home fitness video library. And I recently spoke with Jane Fonda, asked her why she devoted her 5th fitness tape to the subject of weights.
I think more and more people realize that for total fitness, strength building, muscle toning and contouring with weights is an important component of total fitness, and I've been doing it for about 7 years.
But there isn't time in the day to do all your tapes. I mean, if you lay the men down, there's no time in the day to do anything else, you know.
No, you switch around, but I would say the ideal workout for basic fitness would be doing a weight workout 3 times a week and then doing some kind of aerobic workout. You know, it could be one of my aerobic tapes or swimming or walking or running or biking or something in between times, or even the same day, 4 or 5 days a week.
When you started this and somebody suggested that you do a workout videotape, the market was very
there wasn't
new, and it was a cottage industry.
Right.
Did you ever think
no
it was going to go so crazy?
No, I didn't. At the time, the biggest selling tape had sold 25,000, and I remember thinking, oh God, wouldn't it be great if I could sell 25,000? And 3 million tapes later, you know, we created an industry.
Bette
and it's very
Midler
exciting.
Bette Midler has a great line in her act in which she says, "Can you ever believe that Jane Fonda would embrace capitalism so fervently?" You've done very well with these. I mean, as you say, 3 million tapes. That's a whole lot of tape.
It's a lot of tape, and they support a children's camp, and they support a lot of very good things. I'm very proud of what I do with it.
I was struck. I looked at a transcript of the last time you were on the program, and I was struck, something I would never believe. Jane Fonda always appears in control, perfectly confident. And I heard you, or read that you said to Barbara Walters, that you're a cauldron of insecurities in there, that you're always scared when you go on the air in front of a camera or whatever. Really?
When I'm acting in something that means, I don't get nervous coming on a show like this so much. I'll never watch it. I will never watch myself on television.
Really?
No, I'll watch myself in a movie because I'm not me, I'm somebody else. But, oh boy, when I get up in the morning to go to act in a movie, in a role that really means something to me, and I go through all kinds of horrible things, and I'm not so easy to live with. And the worst is like the month before the film starts. I get real down on myself. I think it's like going through a metamorphosis of leaving yourself behind and becoming someone else. It's weird.
When it actually shows up on screen, do you have that feeling of, aha, I overcame it? I mean,
sometimes.
I defeated those insecurities and that fear?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, you know, when you play tennis and the ball hits the racket just right and there's that sound, sometimes when you finish a scene, it's like hearing that sound. You know, you got it. And,
You know you've got it?
Now, this workout with weight tape.
No, do you know when you've got it after a scene?
Yeah, I know when I've got it after a scene most of the time. Sometimes I think I've got it, and then I see it, and it's wrong.
You know nobody believed that about you. I mean, that you're uncertain and insecure like that.
Well, I hope not.
Fool?
No, that's not true. I think it's, otherwise I wouldn't be talking on it in front of millions of people. But, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, with being... When you've been in the business as long as I have and you're still nervous, and you said that you get nervous sometimes too before going on the air.
All the time.
What does it mean? It just means that we care. It means that we are really committed to our work and we care, and we're not going to phone it in, is the expression in my business. You know, I don't phone it in. I really commit myself. Totally.
Well, maybe there is an advantage to those nerves, but it's nice to have you here again.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
To see you. Thank you. And we'll be right back.
Where you sleep out every night and the only law is right, back in the saddle again. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you, keep smiling until then.
46 minutes after Does That Ever Bring Back Memories? For over 50 years worth of radio and records, personal appearances, TV and movies, Roy Rogers and Dale Evans and Gene Autry have colored the dreams of little cowpokes around the world. And Roy and Dale now host their own show, Happy Trails Theater, for the Nashville Network. So does Gene. His is Melody Ranch Theater. Today they're making their first TV appearance together at a taping of Gene's show. That will air early next year, but we've got them live for the very first time ever on TV from Gene's set in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it's nice to have you with us.
It's our pleasure. Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
It really is a privilege. That did bring back some memories. I just wonder, you all have done so much together. You've even appeared in movies together. Why did it take so long for you all to get together on TV?
Well, I guess that when I was making pictures, well, I did an awful lot of tours, one-night stands. So while I was away, Roy was back in Hollywood making pictures, and then by the time I got back, he was out. So our trailers didn't seem to cross very often, except a few times socially.
We only had one crew at Republic, so when they were working with you, I was on the road trying to make a living, and when they was working with me, so was Gene's, because we weren't making that much money.
But Roy, in the papers, there was always talk about this rivalry between you two, the battle of the singing cowboys. Was that really true?
Honey, that was plotted by the head office and our publicity department, and they made a big thing out of it because Gene was fighting the studio, and so was I was fighting, trying to get started, and they switched it back and forth, and that's basically what the whole thing was about. As far as Gene and I, we never had a chance to even get acquainted, so we had nothing to be mad at one another for. So we were competitors.
It made good copy, right? It made a good copy in the paper.
Yeah, that's right.
And Dale, you were really the first woman to have any kind of a substantial role in the Westerns. Am I correct?
Yes, I guess so. Prior to that, women were pretty much scenery in a scene, you know, and everything was for the cowboy. But Mr. Yates, who was head of Republic at the time, went to New York and saw Oklahoma, and he decided that Roy's pictures should be more like Oklahoma, with a larger girl's part and more singing, more horses, more budget, more everything, and that's the way it started.
We must have done Oklahoma at least 17 times.
That's right.
You two met on a picture, I know, but then it seems like as soon as you got married, Dale, you then disappeared from the movies. Why was that?
Well, for one thing, the kids wouldn't believe the stories, really, if we were married in real life. That's one thing. But then, of course, we worked together later on in our television series, and I played myself just as Roy has always played himself, as Dale Evans, as a Western character.
Besides, you were an instant mother. When we got married, I had 3 babies, so
that's right.
She had her hands full there, too.
You better believe it. I got a lot more questions I want to ask you guys. Let's take a commercial break for just a moment. We'll come right back right after this with more of Roy Rogers, Dale Evans, and Gene Autry after this from Ocean Spray. It is now 51 after. We are back talking with Roy Rogers and Dale Evans and Gene Autry in Knoxville. Do I have to say anything more? I sure remember watching all the Westerns. Do you think that, Gene, that the real, honest-to-goodness Western will ever come back as far as being remade, new ones being made?
Well, yes, I think so, because I think everything runs in cycles. And I think that Western pictures were so big in the beginning of the motion picture industry that it's always been the backbone of the picture industry. It used to, when the producers were having trouble, well, they would grab Tom Mix or Buck Jones or John Wayne, and of course when I came along as the first singing cowboy, that was something quite different. But I think that Western pictures will always be a very important part of Hollywood and motion pictures.
I think it'd be great if they came back. Dale, in doing this research, I found a little something. Your quote, which says, "To tell you the truth, I never did like wearing all those cowboy clothes." Dale Evans didn't like wearing cowboy clothes?
I never thought that I was the type. I never thought, I really wasn't a horsewoman. You know, simply because I was from Texas, they thought I could ride a horse. And that was a grim mistake on their part. I did have to take lessons, but I don't wear them a great deal nowadays. But, you know, I travel a great deal, and I do concerts. And people ask so often, why don't you make some more, or Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, why don't you make some more great Western pictures for our children to see? That's why I'm so grateful to Ross Bagwell Communications and the Nashville Network for Happy Trails Theater and Melody Ranch to show the old pictures because they're brand new to a lot of young people.
And people also, not only the movies and the TV shows, but people come into, you've got this big museum, the Roy Rogers and Dale Evans Museum. How many people go through there every day? A couple 100,000?
Not every day, no, honey. I have about that much every year.
And you have said that every time you walk in there, you tear up. What makes you cry?
Well, I got some very fond memories in there. Yeah. Old Trigger was one of the greatest horses I've ever seen. And he's standing there beautifully mounted, rearing on his hind legs. And then I go a little farther, and here's Dale's little horse, Buttermilk. And Bullet's sitting there looking up at Trigger. And then we go around the corner, here's Trigger Jr. And we have, it's a personal museum. It's a story of mine and Dale's lives. And we start out with our kids, and we've, like all families, we've had our share of tragedies. We've lost 3 children, but we still got 6 great kids, 16 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandchildren. So we have a lot to see when we go through there, and it's a story. It's a personal museum. It's a story of our lives.
Gene, you have all made it not only in show business, but in the business part of it, all successful business people. What do you think made it different for you that you did so well?
Well, I don't know. Just being at the right place at the right time, I guess. It's the way I feel about it.
Gene?
And
you.
Yes.
Yes. She said, ask you about made it so well in the business world.
Well, I think I learned a long time ago that it's not what you make at the time, but it's how you invest your money. And I have a wonderful wife that was a businesswoman. She was a banker. And I think that Jackie has done more for me in the last few years to have fine investments that's going to last forever when I decide that I don't want to be involved with baseball or something, but that's it.
Well, we welcome all of you here on the program this morning, and thank you.
Quick review now of the news and weather headlines. First to Washington for the news, and Jed Duval. Jed?
Charlie, Vice President George Bush clears himself for takeoff today, flying to Houston to formally announce for president. The Department of Health and Human Services will this week propose tough new standards to improve the care of more than 1 million people in 16,000 nursing homes across the country. In the Philippines, leftist unions in coalition with moderate labor groups are calling for strikes in various industries all week and then an everybody-out general strike on Friday. The Nobel Prize winner in medicine is a Japanese scientist working at MIT. Susumu Tanagawa studied the human immune system. Folks have spotted but have not been able to catch yet a dog on an island in the Houston Ship Channel. The animal, a golden retriever, appeared thin and ragged when last seen last week. Some fear the dog may have been left on the little island. Now the weather. Spencer?
Okay, Jed, Florida braces for the approach of Tropical Storm Floyd, which is almost at hurricane strength right now. The storm is centered about 100 miles southwest of Key West, moving due northward towards the Fort Myers area. As it moves inland early this evening, it'll bring rainfall amounts between 5 and 10 inches. Tides will be 3 to 5 feet above normal. Very serious storm flooding is expected. That's a look at the weather. Charlie?
Thank you very much, Spencer. Tomorrow on our air, Vice President George Bush. By tomorrow, he'll be candidate Bush.
Also, Malcolm Forbes on the 400 wealthiest people in America.
See you then.